It starts, like so many evenings, with a bus bench that nobody really sees. Alder Lane is already folding into dusk. The office park behind it hums with tired computers and overworked air conditioning, but out here, the soundtrack is softer. Passing cars, a distant siren, the rattle of a loose street sign in the wind. On the worn green bench, one woman waits. We'll call her Iris. She scrolls through her phone, thumb tracing the same routine path her body takes every weekday. A quick message to her sister, leaving now. A reply pops up almost instantly. A heart, a joke about leftovers waiting in the fridge. Nothing dramatic, nothing that feels like a last anything. At 6:17 p.m., the bus pulls up. The doors hiss open. Iris stands, smooths her jacket, and steps on. The transit card reader beeps. One short, satisfied note. Data stamped, fare paid. The driver nods. Iris moves down the aisle, looking for a seat that isn't too close, but not too far. Other riders will later remember small details. The woman with the canvas tote bag. The one who kept checking her phone. The one who apologized when she brushed past a stroller. What nobody will remember is seeing her get off. The route tonight is almost painfully ordinary. Office workers, students, a couple arguing quietly in the back. At one point, the bus jerks into a brief detour around construction, past a side street the regulars barely notice. The rear camera blinks, glitches, and then recovers. At the downtown terminal, an empty plastic seat waits where Iris usually ends her day. Her sister's phone buzzes twice, then 3 times, as messages slide into silence. Everything okay? Did you miss the bus? Call me when you get this. The transit logs show one clear fact. Iris tapped in. But there is no recorded tap out. Somewhere between that worn green bench on Alder Lane and the bright, noisy terminal, Iris vanishes. This is not a single case. Iris is a composite, a careful, anonymized portrait drawn from several real people who stepped onto public transit and were never seen again by the people who loved them. Tonight, we're not hunting a twist ending. We're tracing the gaps in a journey we all think we understand.
Truth is stranger than fiction, and tonight, it's riding the bus. You're listening to Rise Stories, where every crime tells a story, and every story asks us to look a little harder at the systems we trust. I'm your host, Samnang Bradley, researcher, investigator, and self-confessed transit schedule nerd.
And I'm James Bradley, your co-host, true crime analyst, and the guy who still screenshots bus timetables like they're rare artifacts. We follow the evidence, not the noise, and tonight that evidence starts with a very familiar commute.
Before we go any further, we want to be really clear about something. Iris is not a puzzle for you to solve at home. She is a composite built from multiple unsolved disappearances that happened in and around public transit. We've changed identifying details, mixed timelines, and blurred locations on purpose. The point isn't which real case is this. The point is, why do riders vanish in the space between 2 ordinary stops, and what happens when the system can't see them clearly?
Yeah, so if you find yourself thinking, wait, this sounds like that one story from that one city, I promise you, it sort of does, and it also sort of doesn't. It overlaps with several. We're not here to send anyone on a real-world scavenger hunt or to encourage calling up families or agencies. Please don't do that. We're here to talk big picture. Adult missing cases, how we treat routine bus routes as inherently safe, and where the investigative blind spots live.
And I'm Kevin, a true crime author who spends a lot of time in archives, in neighborhoods, and, honestly, on buses, trying to understand how a perfectly ordinary day can fracture into a permanent question mark. Every crime tells a story, but in cases like these, the story is often incomplete. Tonight, we're trying to fill in some of the systemic pieces, not the private ones.
So let's walk through Iris's last afternoon. step by step, like we would if this file landed on a detective's desk, but without the sensational details that nobody needs. Where does her day start to narrow into that ride?
For Iris, the day begins early. She's at her desk before most of her coworkers, a reusable mug cooling beside a spreadsheet that seems to grow extra columns every week. Her job isn't glamorous, but it is steady. Data entry, vendor emails, a birthday card being passed quietly from cubicle to cubicle. Around 5:07 p.m., she sends a message to a group chat with family, something small, something mundane, like a meme about tired office workers. They send laughing reactions. No one reads it as a goodbye. At 5:42 p.m., her access card records her leaving the building. Security footage shows her walking out through the lobby, headphones in, bag over her shoulder, the kind of posture that says, "I know exactly where I'm going." She does. She takes the same sidewalk she always does, cutting past the corner deli where the owner nods, past the dry cleaner with the faded open sign, toward the Alder Lane bus bench. On the way, she texts a friend about weekend plans, mentions having to get up early the next morning, mentions nothing alarming. Her phone pings, lights up, goes dark again in her hand. At the bench, 2 other people are already waiting, a teenager in a hoodie, an older man with a newspaper folded under his arm. One of them will later remember that she apologized when she sat down, as if she thought she was in the way. At 6:16 p.m., the bus turns onto Alder Lane. At 6:17, the doors slide open. She steps up. Tap of the card, beep. The digital record says, boarded.
So, from an investigative lens, that's a pretty solid start. We've got building access logs, at least one usable security camera, multiple digital communications, and a confirmed boarding time. Sam, if you're piecing this together as a cold case analyst, what's next? Where do you point the highlighter?
I'm circling everything that ties her to that route and everything that proves this wasn't a spontaneous vanishing act. She takes family when she leaves work. That's a routine. She has weekend plans. She mentions getting up early tomorrow. Those are forward-looking details. People planning to vanish usually don't prepay their time like that. Then we've got witnesses at the bench and on the bus. They're not dramatizing it. They don't remember big arguments or dramatic exits. They remember her saying sorry when she brushed past or nodding when someone scooted their bag. So far, her day is boring in the best possible way. And then the timeline hits the bus interior, and that's where things start to slip.
And that's a pattern you see in a lot of real cases like this. The world outside the bus gives us all these clean timestamps and angles. Inside the bus, we're dealing with crowded aisles, the backs of heads, cameras that weren't installed to solve mysteries, just to deter trouble.
Yeah, let's talk about those cameras and maps, because this is where tech gives us just enough certainty to be overconfident and just enough failure to leave families with questions.
On paper, Iris's route is pretty straightforward. You've got a line that goes from the office park to the downtown terminal with a mix of residential and commercial stops. Most modern city buses have cameras, but they're not all created equal. In cases we drew from, you see a patchwork. One camera aimed at the front door and fare box, another mid-aisle, maybe one at the back, if it's working that day. In Iris's composite route, the front camera gives us a partial shot when she boards. You can make out the side of her face, the strap of her bag. After that, the angle mostly belongs to people closer to the driver. The mid-bus camera, that's where things get interesting. There's a brief route detour because of construction. Common, unremarkable. But during that detour, the mid-bus camera in our model case glitches, drops to black for part of a minute, then comes back. When investigators pull it later, that gap feels like a crater.
And just to underline this, camera glitches happen. Hard drives fill up, systems overheat, angles miss things. It doesn't automatically mean a crime occurred in that exact window. But families see a blank space in the footage and a blank space in the story. And of course, those two start to overlap.
Outside the bus, you've got another incomplete jigsaw. Some stops have high-quality CCTV pointed right at the curb. Others rely on a camera in a nearby storefront that catches just a slice of the sidewalk, or nothing at all. In one real case that fed into Iris, there was a camera that clearly showed the bus pull up and pull away, but a tree branch obscured the actual doors. The missing person could have gotten off or stayed on, and that inch of leaf cover kept the answer out of reach.
Maps tell us that the bus did hit every stop on that route, including the brief construction detour. GPS logs confirm it never dramatically left its path. There's no record of a major incident on board reported to dispatch, no medical call, no fight logged. Yet at the downtown terminal, there's one more data point. Iris never taps out. Her transit card registers entry at 6:17 p.m. And then, nothing. We have a beginning. We don't have a clean end.
This is usually the moment when people on the outside say, well, maybe she just got off early. And in adult missing cases, that sentence does a lot of damage.
Right. We're very comfortable narrating other adults' lives for them. She was stressed. She needed a break. People disappear on purpose all the time. And listen, sometimes adults do choose to step off the grid. That happens. But that explanation often gets applied way too quickly, especially when the person missing is a woman, a person of color, someone working class, someone whose routines don't scream headline material.
In some of the real investigations we drew from, the first phone calls from family landed like this. Have you checked the hospitals? Give it a day. She might just need space. She's an adult. She can get off wherever she wants. All technically true. Adults do have the right to change their minds, but context matters. In Iris's life, we see a person with tight routines, obligations, and ties. She has a job that tracks her entry and exit. She has messages lined up about tomorrow morning. She has a cat that will absolutely knock something over if she's late with dinner. When someone like that fails to reach the destination they never miss, and we still default to, she probably just got off early, what we're really saying is, I don't want to believe something bad happened on a bus. I might ride too.
And the system bakes that in, right? The policy lens often starts with autonomy. Adults can make choices, including choices we don't understand. But that lens also means some missing riders don't get urgency. Nobody's flipping through footage in the first critical hours because on paper, nothing dramatic happened. No abandoned car, no blood at a scene, just a person who, quote, didn't come home.
From the families I've interviewed over the years, what hurts as much as the disappearance is that subtle suggestion that their loved one was flaky, unstable, or impulsive. That's why victimology matters, but it has to be done with dignity. It's not about prying into every private message or pathologizing someone's struggles. It's about asking, who was this person in their community? What patterns define them? What would actually be out of character?
So let's sit with Iris as a person for a moment, not as a case file. What do we actually know about how anchored she is to that commute?
We know Iris's bus route is tied to a lot of things that don't show up in police reports. Her landlord knows she drops her rent in the slot on the same day every month on the way back from that line. The deli owner notices if she doesn't grab a snack on Fridays. A neighbor knows she usually gets home around the same time because they pass each other in the hallway with that awkward nod. She's not a ghost floating between stops. She has weight in her community. She sends her mom recipe photos. She reminds a coworker about a dentist appointment. She makes plans that extend beyond this particular Tuesday. If she were going to run, she'd be abandoning more than just a bus route. She'd be dropping out of a whole network of small, consistent promises. Ethically, what we don't do is root around in her romantic life or medical history looking for a tidy story to make ourselves comfortable. We respect that some parts of a person's life belong to them, even in death or in absence. But we can say, all signs in this composite point away from a voluntary, unannounced disappearance and towards something else happening between point A and point B.
Which brings us to the less cinematic part of all this, bureaucracy. Because in Iris's universe, there isn't just one person or one agency holding the whole picture of her ride.
Yeah, think about all the hands on the puzzle pieces. You've got the city transit agency running the buses and collecting card data. You might have a private company running security at the downtown terminal. Local police handle missing persons reports. In some regions, another department oversees the street cameras along the route. Each of those entities has their own data systems, retention policies, and priorities. And unless there are really strong protocols, they're not always talking to each other in a timely, coordinated way.
In one real-world investigation I studied, the bus company had usable GPS logs showing that a coach paused longer than usual near a particular intersection the night a rider went missing. Police, meanwhile, had a missing persons report but didn't have quick access to that granular route data. By the time someone thought to connect those dots, the nearby shop's security footage had been overwritten as part of their standard 30-day cycle. No one was malicious. Everyone was following their own rules. But the gaps lined up in a way that, for the family, felt indistinguishable from indifference.
And that's the tricky thing with criticizing systems. We're not saying, hey, bus drivers are villains or detectives don't care. In fact, in a lot of these cases, you see individuals going above and beyond, drivers printing their own flyers, officers rewatching grainy footage on their own time. The problem is the scaffolding. Fragmented oversight means no one person owns the full commute.
Exactly. From an investigative standpoint, what would help is a streamlined way to say, okay, we have an adult who didn't make it from origin to terminal. Let's lock the relevant data now. GPS, camera footage, driver statements, before retention policies erase it. Instead, what sometimes happens is a slow, polite game of phone tag between departments while clocks quietly run out on crucial evidence.
And then there's the wild card. Fellow passengers. They're basically the only ones living the story from the inside. How often do we actually hear from them in time?
Not as often as you'd hope. In the anonymized interviews I've read and done, passengers remember flashes, a backpack bump, someone standing a little too close, a heated whisper near the back doors. But a lot of folks don't realize what they saw might matter until they see a news alert days or weeks later. By then, details blur. Was that on the Tuesday bus or the Wednesday bus? Was she wearing a blue jacket or gray? Did she get off at the stop before mine, or am I mixing that up with someone else? And there's fear. People worry about getting involved, about misidentifying someone, about saying the wrong thing. If they're part of a community that's over-policed, there can be a very rational hesitation to walk into a station and say, I think I saw something.
On the investigative side, when passengers do come forward early, their accounts can help narrow the window where something might have happened. Maybe two riders both clearly remember Iris still being on the bus at a particular major intersection. Maybe someone remembers her moving toward the rear doors but not actually stepping off. Even imperfect memories can shave off stops, pinpoint a segment of the route, or highlight dynamics, like a person who seemed fixated on her, or a crowded moment where visibility dropped.
There's also this weird psychological thing where, because a bus is public, people assume someone else is probably paying better attention. It's like the bystander effect with handrails and plastic seats. You think, if something really bad was happening, someone would say something. The driver would notice. The cameras would see it. So you downgrade your own unease to, I'm probably overreacting.
One of the small, constructive things listeners can take from cases like Iris's is this. If something feels off on your commute, someone being followed, harassed, cornered, and it feels safe to do so, write down what you're seeing, the time, the intersection, a description that's more than just, they looked weird. You don't have to share it with anyone right away. But if, days later, you learn that someone went missing on that exact route, you've preserved details your memory might have smoothed away.
We've talked a lot about the gaps. I want to pivot into what better could look like, because this isn't a hopeless space. Public transit can be a lifeline. It can also be safer by design for riders who feel vulnerable.
Okay, so let's build the ideal version of how a case like Iris's would be handled. What's at the top of your wish list, Sam?
First, standardized data retention tied to potential missing persons events. If a rider is reported missing and the last confirmed sighting is on a bus or at a stop, there should be a clear, automatic trigger. Preserve all relevant footage and logs for an extended period, even if the default is, say, 30 days. Second, rapid review protocols. Instead of waiting to see if someone turns up, there could be a tiered system where certain risk factors, no prior disappearances, strong community ties, sudden break-in routine, prompt a quick pull of route footage and GPS data.
I'd add training for drivers and staff that goes beyond, call this number if there's a fight. Give them tools to document concerns about passengers who seem especially vulnerable without profiling. And make sure they know that if a family calls asking, "Was my sister on your bus?" there's a protocol for routing that question into an actual investigative channel, not just, "Sorry, we can't give out information."
And for the tech side, better integration between systems. If the bus GPS shows an unusual stop or delay on a night when someone disappears, that anomaly should light up for both transit and law enforcement, not just live forever in some spreadsheet only a route planner ever opens. We're not talking about building a surveillance state. We're talking about using the data we already collect in ways that actually protect people when something goes wrong.
Those are big structural moves. On the listener level, there's power too, but it looks different from the way true crime often trains us to think. It's less about sleuthing and more about solidarity.
If you're someone who cares about cases like Iris's, there are ethical ways to plug in. One is amplifying verified official appeals from families or agencies. When a transit-related missing persons alert goes out, sharing that through your networks can matter, especially if you live anywhere near the region. Another is advocating locally for policies that make routes safer. Better lighting at stops, clear signage about how to report concerning behavior, support for transit workers who flag patterns that worry them. What we don't encourage, and this is important, is trying to match our composite iris to any one real person, or mapping our fictional Alder Lane onto your city. That kind of speculation can end up harassing families, drivers, and communities who are already carrying enough.
Yeah, the internet loves to play connect the dots. But sometimes the most radical thing you can do as a true crime listener is not connect them. Instead, you can ask, does my city have a vulnerable road user plan that includes transit riders? Do missing adults get the same coordinated response as missing kids here? Are local officials talking about data sharing between agencies, or is that just a buzzword?
And if tonight's story feels a little close to home, if you rely on public transit or someone you love does, it's okay if this stirs up some anxiety. Remember, the composite iris comes from a small subset of cases spread over many years and places. Public transit moves millions of people safely every day. If you need to pause this episode, talk it through with someone, or reach out to a mental health resource, please do that. Your well-being matters more than finishing any podcast.
As we start to land this, I want each of us to name one assumption we hope listeners will reconsider about routine commutes and who gets urgency when they don't come home. Kevin, you want to go first?
I'd love people to rethink the idea that ordinary routes are automatically safe routes. Familiarity is comforting, but it can also be anesthetizing. Just because you've taken the same bus 100 times doesn't mean nothing bad can ever happen on it. It just means you have more chances to pay attention to yourself, to others, and to the systems that are supposed to protect you.
For me, it's the assumption that missing adults probably just needed space. Justice is a journey, not a destination. And part of that journey is treating adult missing cases with the nuance they deserve. Context should drive urgency, not stereotypes about who is likely to walk away from their life.
I want us to question the belief that because the space is public, it's automatically watched in a meaningful way. We think cameras equal safety, but as Iris's composite shows, cameras can glitch, angles can miss, footage can vanish into retention policies. Real safety comes from people and processes, not just pixels.
And maybe one more quiet assumption. Whose stories we think are worthy of this kind of attention. Behind every headline is a human story. But a lot of these transit disappearances never even make it to a headline. If Iris reminds you of someone you know, a neighbor, a coworker, a stranger you've shared a bus with, that connection can be the starting point for empathy, not for digging.
As we close, I want to honor the real people behind Iris, the riders who tapped their cards, took their seats, and were loved fiercely by someone waiting at a terminal or a kitchen table or a window that faced the route. We're not naming them here. That choice belongs to their families and to the journalists and advocates working directly with them. But we see them. And if you're someone carrying one of those questions tonight, wondering what happened on a bus that never brought your person home, this episode is for you.
If this conversation resonated with you or made you look at your own commute a little differently, we'd love for you to stay with us. Subscribe to Rise Stories on whatever app you're using right now so you don't miss future episodes where we keep digging carefully into the cases and systems that shape our sense of safety.
You can also rate and review the show. It sounds like a tiny thing, but it really does help ethical, victim-centered true crime find its audience and push back against more sensational content. And if you want to share your reflections without speculating about real routes or people, post them and tag the show so the community can join you in that deeper conversation.
Thank you for spending this time with us in Iris's world and in the world of the real writer she represents. Cold cases, clear voices, clues, context, consequences. Until next time, together we rise.